But as a parent, if you don't ever apologize to your kids, it's either because you're perfect or you're prideful. And I know it's not because you're perfect.
Who's going to try and admit that you're perfect?
If I am going through life never apologizing to my kids, it's not because I've gotten it right every time. It's because I'm still too prideful to go to them in humility and to admit to them.
Yeah.
Like, hey, the way I spoke to you wasn't okay.
Right.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Making History. My name is Brian.
And I'm Katie.
And we're the Hesses. Katie, how are you?
I'm tired.
Yeah.
It's kids camp week at church.
Yes.
And so it's been fun. It's been a really good time.
Mm-hmm.
We've only got 3 days out of the week, so it's not like a full-blown week, but even that, it takes all the energy you got.
Yeah. It also doesn't help you being up till 2 a.m. every night.
Sure.
Leading up to that.
Planning, because I planned the whole thing. I'm running it. I'm organizing it. I'm putting together the crafts, the snacks, the games, and volunteers, and all the things. So I feel like my brain is like beep, 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 all the time.
Yep. So this will be a fun episode.
Yes, we'll see. We'll see how together the thoughts are today.
Yeah. But it's going really well. I've not been there, but everybody I've heard from says it's been awesome.
Yeah, the kids seem to be having a really good time, and that's what matters. So
yeah,
it's
there you
good.
go.
You're having a good week. You got a haircut.
I got a haircut today. I've been spending more time with Ollie than ever.
Yep.
Me and him.
That's true. You've been like solo dadding it with Ollie.
Yeah, it's been good.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So with that being said, this is going to be a pretty short episode.
Yes,
indeed.
indeed.
Actually, before we get started, I always do this at the end of the episode. I'm going to do it right now, just for everybody listening who maybe doesn't make it to the end. I have a favor to ask everybody. If you will do us a favor, if you're listening to this and you have found any value in our content, and if you have enjoyed our podcast, if you could please do us a favor and give us a good review on whatever platform you're listening on. That goes a long way. It's a small thing you can do that helps us in a big way. And you don't even have to like write out a whole thing. You can just click that 5-star.
Yeah. Super
Boom.
Fast.
One
Literally
click,
takes
done.
1 second.
Yep. And same thing if you're watching this on YouTube. If you could like this video and subscribe, helps in a big way.
Yep.
Okay, Here we go.
Here we go.
So let's talk about something that we briefly mentioned a couple weeks ago and thought it would be deserving of maybe a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what people refer to as rupture and repair.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say in the same way that kids are good at, like we talk about how kids are good at being kids.
Yeah.
They're good at being immature. Mm-hmm. They're good at being loud, and they can be obnoxious and destructive and emotionally volatile.
Sure.
And they're really good at that.
Yeah.
I think in the same way, parents are really good at doing things that rupture the relationship with our kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I mean, life for most people is a little chaotic. Mm-hmm. It doesn't help that the culture we live in is constantly driving us to be busy and to be like overstimulated.
Yes.
Constantly.
Always something happening, talking to us, lighting up, like always. Yeah.
Yeah, so that doesn't help. But yeah, I think parents, I can speak from experience. Also, I think just observing people in general right now.
Sure.
I think parents are really good at dealing harshly with their kids. Mm-hmm. Good at maybe having big reactions to things that don't warrant big reactions.
Yeah. Yep.
Getting really angry and irritable about things that just maybe don't warrant that. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to happen.
Yeah. Because it's like, well, we've talked about if the reaction is bigger than the actual situation justifies, there's other things going on, you know,
Sure.
other things are thrown in the mix. And unfortunately, our kids sometimes fall subject to the brunt of the buildup of frustration and stimulation and all those things, because I think it's easy as a parent, especially when you have the responsibilities of taking care of your kids and your jobs and taking care of the house and taking care of yourself on top of all that. Like, it just piles up super quickly, and whatever other responsibilities you have outside of those things, like volunteering or whatever might pop up. And it's easy for all of those things to build up. And then our kid can come up and be like, can I have a snack? And just like say it in like a slightly wrong way. And we're like, what? Stop it. And that's just when it all comes out.
Yeah. Even as much as you and I spend time like thinking about how we want to be as parents, we work on increasing our capacity to be self-controlled, to be responsible, to be calm. And we do that pretty well generally, but even still, like, I get irritable. Izzy does little things that just drive me crazy, and I just don't even, because I don't know why.
Don't have the time for that.
I just don't want you to do any of the things that you're doing in the way that you're doing. That's how I feel sometimes. So there is kind of let's look at like maturity from the parent's perspective as like a two-sided coin. One aspect of growing up and maturing brings with it the capacity, like I just said, a greater capacity to be self-controlled, to manage your emotions so that you don't put that off onto the kids.
Yeah.
Because that's something that happens easily, is parents become irresponsible and they end up living and behaving in such a way that their kids end up being responsible for their emotions, for their reactions.
Yep.
And that's really unfair for the kids. And that's not how we want to be. So, like I said, part of growing up and part of maturing brings with it that greater capacity.
Yeah.
So that I can become the type of person that my kids will do kid things and I can do adult things.
Yes.
And they will act like kids and I can act like an adult.
Right.
And I can act like the one, we joked about this, I can actually act like the one with a developed brain.
Right.
So
the one who's actually able to act maturely. We are physically able to do these things, whereas kids are not.
Yes, I at least have the potential, and so I would love to actualize that potential.
Right.
So that's one side of maturity, is actually becoming that type of person. The other side of maturity is knowing that I'm like, as much as I grow up and as mature as I become, I'm still not going to be a perfect father.
Right.
So the other side of maturity is knowing that when I don't get it right, I need to have a contingency plan in place so that when I mess up and when I rupture the relationship with the kids, when I deal with them way too harshly, when I speak to them in ways that they don't deserve, I have a plan in place to where I can go and repair the damage that I did.
Yes.
And that looks like humility. And that's something I'm getting better at. If I'm being honest, sometimes I still like have that thing in me that's like, well, no, I'm the dad, so I should be able to deal with the situation however I see fit.
Sure, yeah.
And I think that's an easy thought to have. I don't think it's necessarily good or true, but it is like a reality. And so that's something I'm like thinking through and realizing that, okay, yes, I'm the dad, but being a father doesn't mean that however I speak to my kids is justified. I think being a father should look like modeling the things like we talk about that we want our kids to become, but also modeling humility and knowing that, okay, the way I spoke to you was totally uncalled for. Yes, I didn't like the way you were eating that or whatever. I didn't like the way you were brushing your teeth or whatever. But it didn't warrant my childish outburst.
Sure.
So,
which, like, can we just be real for a second, though? That, like, when kids do stuff that is just like, why? Why do you have to do it that way? Like, it's just so hard. And I'd just be like, just stop it. Stop all the things that you're doing. Just do it like a normal person.
Right. Stop licking the butter off the toast and just eat the bread.
That's not a real example in this household at all. No. Isabel's never done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true though. And like so often our outbursts happen because of our preferences getting stepped on.
Sure.
Too. Like a lot of times, like when I've looked back at times that I've like, lashed out or whatever, or just kind of, raised my voice at the girls and said something that, just was uncalled for. Most of the time, it's just because they were annoying.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that they were necessarily doing anything wrong. It was just that they were doing something that they found amusing that I did not.
Yeah.
Or it was just the wrong timing. And again, it wasn't that they were doing something wrong. It just came at an inopportune time for me. Mm-hmm. And so I really, like, in that moment, it was selfishly acting out because it's like, this is inconvenient for me. Need me later.
Yeah.
Is basically what that translates to. But like, that's so unfair to the kid to get mad at them for wanting to come to you and connect or, ask for a snack or say that they're thirsty. They have needs and we are there to help meet their needs. And when it's inconvenient, it's harder to stay level-headed.
Yeah.
But like, how confusing would that be? Where like 90% of the time, our kids come to us and we're like, oh yeah, sure, we can help you with that. Or you're like, yeah, let's play a game, let's do it. But like these few times when we do lash out, they're like, wait, I just asked you the same question yesterday and you were fine. Like, why are you all of a sudden yelling at me? What's going on?
Yeah, that's super real. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know we've both had instances recently with the girls.
Yeah.
Where it was exactly that. It was, we reacted in a way that the situation didn't warrant. Mm-hmm. And we had to go back and figure out how to fix it.
Yeah.
You had a moment with Izzy, is that right?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So I've been a little bit more, I've had to watch myself more lately, I guess I should say, just because I have more going on than I typically do. And so I feel like I am stretched to my capacity more than usual. And so I've had to work harder to control my responses and not let myself get agitated. But a couple days ago, Izzy came up and I don't know if she had been asking already or what her deal was, but she just came and she just she needed something. I don't remember what it was, but she yelled at me for it. And I was in the middle of a project or something. And I was like, Izzy, do not yell at me. I was like, go in the other room and come back in when you're ready. And I was pretty harsh with how I said it. And instantly I was like, ugh, dang it. No, that wasn't how that needed to come out. But it was when it was a reaction, not a response. Mm-hmm. And, I instantly knew, okay, I'm going to have to, come back to that moment. And, cause she went away, she was fine. She didn't cry or anything, but you could tell she was really frustrated. And so a few minutes later, I think I was finishing something up. I finished up, calmed myself down, got to a level space. And I found her and I just said, hey, Isabel, can I talk to you? She was like, yeah. And I just told her, I was like, I'm so sorry that I yelled at you earlier and I got frustrated. It was a bad time for me and I did not speak to you in the way that I wanted to. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I was like, I don't want to talk to you like that. So, I apologize. I was like, can you forgive me? And she was like, yeah. And then she came in for a big hug. And then as she was still hugging me, she goes, Mommy. And I was like, yeah. And she goes, I'm really sorry that I yelled at you too. I was like,
oh my goodness.
And so it was such an instant return. I guess I was about to say payback, but I feel like that sounds negative.
Yeah.
It's an instant return on, sowing in forgiveness and then reaping forgiveness. That was a right away and that doesn't always happen so instantaneously, but she, you could tell she appreciated that I came up to her and said sorry. And then she was like, oh, an unprompted I'm sorry from a 4-year-old feels like a big win.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's cool too. I've heard people talk about how there's like research that like psychologists are doing just on like the quality of relationships, especially between parents and kids, and how like the strongest relationships are the ones that go through this like rupture and repair.
Yeah.
And they're just finding evidence that supports this idea that like as a parent, you don't have to be perfect. You just need to know how to repair when you've ruptured the relationship.
Absolutely.
And that creates like really strong connections between parents and kids.
Yeah. Asking for forgiveness really shows, like you said, it shows so much humility and proves, that it exists in you. And it also shows that you value the other person that you have ruptured the relationship with, because if you don't really value a person and you've messed up with them, it's kind of like, well, it is what it is. Yeah. But when you care for that person, when you love that person and you want to be able to remain in a healthy relationship with them, that shows them, the person who's on the receiving end of like the sorry, that you care enough about them to mend that relationship. Yep.
I had a similar thing with Nora the other day, and I didn't even tell you about this. And it was like right before bedtime. I mean, they're like basically on their way up the stairs, and it was after dinner, and Nora asked if she could have an Oreo, and I was just like, no. Yeah. And I'm in my head, I'm thinking like, you're literally about to go to bed. For sure. Well, first you're about to go up and brush your teeth. And so I was like, no, like, what are you going to eat an Oreo? And then your teeth are going to be nasty, covered in all that like gross chocolate. You're not even going to get to enjoy it. And then you're going to brush your teeth right away. I'm just thinking like, no. And so I tried to offer her something else, something just quick and little. Yeah. And so she was not pleased with that response. Okay. And then I got frustrated. And so we both just got escalated really quickly. And so she storms up to her room and she's laying on her bed. And so when that happens, I will usually give her a few minutes. Yeah. There's a couple things going on. Like, I don't want her to feel like she's not allowed to feel the way she's feeling. Sure. Yeah. But I also don't want myself to be put in a position where I feel like it's my job to like make her or to like instantly chase her down and make her happy again. Right. So I usually give her a few minutes until I feel like maybe she's in a spot to where she is okay with me being around her again. Yeah. And so I went on to lay down on the bed next to her, and I was like, hey, was I too harsh down there? And then she shook her head no. And so I was surprised, because usually she's really honest. Yeah, yeah. So I was like, hey, babe, like, was I way too harsh with you downstairs? And she shook her head no. Yeah. And then she was still really upset. She was like, I just wanted an Oreo. And so I told her, I was like, well, I'm sorry if I was too harsh. Yeah. And but then, a minute later, she's totally good. Yeah. Totally back to normal. Oh yeah. Like nothing happened. Yep. Which is often how it goes with kids. Yes. They're super resilient. Yeah. They can snap back so fast, where it's almost like, well, did that even happen? Are we really good? You sure you're fine? Like, okay. Yeah. But as a parent, if you don't ever apologize to your kids, it's either because you're perfect or you're prideful. And I know it's not because you're perfect. Who's going to try and admit that you're perfect? And that's what I've kind of settled into, is that if I am going through life never apologizing to my kids, it's not because I've gotten it right every time. It's because I'm still too prideful to go to them in humility and to admit to them. Yeah. Like, hey, the way I spoke to you wasn't okay, or the way I reacted, or, whatever. Yeah. Yep. And you can bring back around to the thing that we've talked about of like, we can't expect from our kids what we don't actually expect of ourselves. So like, if we're wanting them to learn how to apologize and be humble human beings, but we're not willing to apologize to them, where are they going to learn it? Yeah. Are they going to be forced to say they're sorry and then actually come out on the other side?
wanting to apologize and mend situations. I don't think so.
Yep.
They're just going to feel like sorry is a word that just allows them to continue doing whatever they were doing in the first place.
Yeah, sure. Like if you think about the type of behavior that you want to see in your kids, if they grow up and they become adults and they move out and they develop a certain like good, positive behavioral trait that wasn't modeled to them by us, then they became that thing, not because of us, but in spite of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like you were saying, like I want to think about the types of things that we want our kids to become. And then you've got to ask the question, okay, am I that person?
Yeah.
Because that's how kids learn.
Right.
That's how kids grow up. That's how they develop character, is that they watch it being modeled to them. They experience in real time what it looks like to be dealt with calmly, to be dealt with maturely. And then over time that they're able to internalize those values and that ability, and they develop a desire to be that way, but it has to be shown to them.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that they can't become that, but if they do, it'll just be in spite of my influence rather than because of my influence.
Right.
And that's a bummer.
Right. That hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, apologizing to your kids, learning to recognize when you have dealt with them in ways that they didn't need to be dealt with, when you reacted in ways that the situation didn't warrant, when you were harsher than you needed to be, and just learning to recognize those times and then have a plan in place to go back and admit to them. And you will be amazed, if you're not already practicing this, you will be amazed at what it does with the quality of your relationship with your kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
All righty.
It feels like a good place to stop.
Sounds good.
And I already gave my spiel
at
the beginning, so let's go ahead and call it.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that is going to be it for this episode. Once again, my name is Brian.
And I'm Katie.
And we're making history. We'll see you next time.